Welcome back, everybody. We're here with another live stream. This is
Yo.
episode number 6. If you are watching on YouTube, make sure to hit the subscribe button. We have new live streams every Thursday, 5 p.m. Eastern, 8 p.m. Pacific time. Today, we're going to be talking about all the recent news. There's been a lot of hype around Bitcoin treasury companies. We're going to get into that. We had some stablecoin news with some law that just got passed in the U.S. We're going over that, and just Bitcoin strategy news. Keep you guys up to date like we always try to do. And nothing we talk about is financial advice. This is just our opinion. We're just two guys on the internet. We've been investing in Bitcoin for about 7 or 8 years now, and the market's always changing, so we kind of just try to give you guys our thoughts on everything that's going on in the market. And I want to start off today's video looking at just kind of some of the basics with Bitcoin, what we're seeing happening in the market right now with BTC and a potential supply shock coming. So let me share my screen here. This is a little chart that I put together here. So what this shows is the amount of Bitcoin that comes out every day from the miners currently is 450 a day. So the Bitcoin mined in 2024 till March of 2028, which is when the next halving is, 450 gets cut in half in March of 2028. So we're going to go from 450 to about, 275, something around there. And we had a halving last year, so last year every day wasn't 450. There was days where it was 900. But you can see this number on the screen. This is 746,000 Bitcoin that are going to be produced by the miners all of 2024 until March of 2028. And what we've seen from the ETFs since they've launched in January of 24, we've had 605,000 Bitcoin put into the ETFs from just the start. They started in late January last year, if I'm not mistaken. And this also includes all of the Bitcoin that was taken out from Grayscale. Grayscale, their ETF started with, I want to say like 700,000. They're down to 200,000. So they lost 500,000 Bitcoin. But the ETF still inflowed over 600,000 BTC. And then just strategy here, they bought the beginning of 2024 till now around 402,000 BTC. So if you look at the number of Bitcoin strategy has, it's going to be more than that. If you look at the number of Bitcoin the ETFs have, it's going to be more than that. We're just accounting for what strategy bought last year in the ETFs, and also including the amount of Bitcoin that Grayscale lost. Right now, I think the ETFs have around 1 million Bitcoin in them. And then if we look at what's on the exchanges right now, see right here, there's not much Bitcoin left to go around for everybody. There's currently, according to coinglass.com, somewhere around 2.1 million Bitcoin left. And what's happened over the past 5 years since 2020, since the halving of 2020, the supply on exchanges has been dropping because the miners cannot give the exchanges enough Bitcoin because there's just more buyers, there's more demand, and there's less Bitcoin that's being produced every single day. Prior to 2020, the exchanges were in accumulation mode. They peaked out at like 3.1 million Bitcoin on exchanges, and they've lost 1 million Bitcoin in about 4 or 5 years. And it's been accelerating, as you can see right here. This is just the past year or so. So they're continuing to lose Bitcoin at an unprecedented level. So not much Bitcoin left. And then you have all these buyers coming in. There's going to be a supply shock in the future. And you can see here, this is the ETF flows over the past 2 weeks. The ETFs aren't slowing down anytime soon. You guys know Saylor's not slowing down anytime soon. Saylor comes out every Monday and he says, like this past Monday, he bought $1 billion of Bitcoin. That's 10,000 Bitcoin taken off the market. That's never going to be sold again. And if you look here, the ETFs are not slowing down just over the past week. $400 million, $200 million, another $400 million day. Just this week alone, markets are closed today because of the holiday here in the U.S. they've taken $1 billion of Bitcoin out of the circulating supply. Now, the ETFs do sell. You get some red days, but they tend to accumulate more over time. At least that's what we've seen since they've launched. And one thing to think about here is what could cause, in the bear market, what could cause the next bear market. Some people speculate that the Bitcoin treasury companies may get over leveraged, or they may, blow up, and they may have to start to sell their Bitcoin with all these Bitcoin treasury companies. We're going to talk about more about that later in the video. But a lot of people are speculating that could be what causes the next Bitcoin bear market. But it could very well also be the ETF flows. The ETF, not the ETFs. They have a lot of Bitcoin. They have over 1 million Bitcoin. And if something spooks the traditional markets, the ETFs tend to sell off Bitcoin. They trade like the S&P. If the S&P is going down, you probably will see the Bitcoin ETFs sell off. That's what we've seen since the ETFs have launched back in January. But you can see there's just a lot of money coming into the ETFs, and this data is all public. But then the last thing that you want to look at here as well is the OTC desk. Right now, the OTC desk, and this is where the institutions, this is where saylor, MicroStrategy, the Metaplanets, this is where they're going to buy their Bitcoin. They're going to the OTC desk. And you can see that the OTC desks have lost a lot of Bitcoin since 2021. They had around 500,000 Bitcoin. Now they're down to around 115,000. And you can see this here. This is up to date. They have around 123,000 Bitcoin in all of the OTC desks that are tracked. Now, there's some speculation with OTC desks if they could potentially get more Bitcoin just from the exchanges. And some people think that this isn't a good stat to look at, but it just goes to show you with the past 4 years, OTC just don't have so much Bitcoin. So if that 100,000 dries up real quick, where are the big players like Strategy? Where are they going to buy their Bitcoin from? Are they going to go to the spot market and do that? Because if they go to the spot market, that would literally cause a supply shock. I can see Bitcoin's price just absolutely go straight to the moon. But just wanted to start today's live stream off with just the basics here. Bitcoin is just math. If there's going to be more demand, the fiat dollars, the Ponzi scheme of fiat dollars, they're going to continue to print these dollars over time, and the M2 money supply is going to go up forever. Bitcoin's set at $21 million coins. So it's just simple supply and demand. More demand with a fixed supply. Bitcoin's going to go up. Gold's going to go up. Everything that has a fixed supply is going to go up as long as the demand's there. And we're seeing a lot of demand, especially with these treasury companies right now. So just wanted to start there with the basics of the Bitcoin supply and demand metric. So
just really quick to piggyback on that. If you guys are tuning in, we appreciate your support. Go ahead and smash the like button, share this, trying to get this out to as many people as possible. We appreciate each and every one of you guys. But basically the supply crunch is happening, and what we're seeing now, we just seen the Swiss bank, I believe it was announced today. They lowered interest rates down to 0%. So that is inflationary, and basically they're going to be printing more money. So the money printer is starting to get turned back on. Now, for those that know, the U.S. rates had not changed. Jerome Rome, he didn't do anything for us on that tip this past week. But there is a lot of conversation and speculation on what, is going on behind the scenes with the current administration, with Trump and his cabinet, and what exactly those conversations are about, because it seems like, Trump's team, along with the president, want rates cut, and there's sort of a back and forth there. Why they're dragging their feet, and we can all speculate as to what that reason is, but the rate cut will come. But regardless of that, there's still so much pent up buy pressure when it comes to Bitcoin specifically. Aaron just showed a couple charts. OTC desk balances are at almost all-time lows. I have another chart that I had pulled up. Give me a minute, I have to find it. But the point is that the supply shock is here, and what everybody is missing here is they're trying to wait on alt season, and we've been saying this for quite some time. Alt season is dead, and the new altcoins are the Bitcoin treasury companies. We'll go into that in a little bit more detail, but yeah, that's my 2 cents on the supply shock.
Yeah, Sean, check out this one here. This is the M2 chart. It's just going it's going up. Like past 5 years, they haven't lowered interest rates, and look, it's at all-time highs. It's like what saylor say? It's going up forever, Laura. They're gonna print money forever. It's going to the moon. Okay, so you see it right there. But
yeah, 100%. Let me pull this chart up. I'm finding it really quick just so they can see it. Let's do a screen share really quick. Okay, so this is from Vivek for Real. Shout out to them. But what you see here is the Bitcoin price with the white line in the exchange reserves. And what you're seeing here is this fall off a cliff really since late 24 up until early May. The euphoria of the ETFs buying and also these Bitcoin treasury companies that are popping up like hotcakes, they're buying too. But historically, when this happens, you see when there's a supply shock, like we've seen the bottom of the bear market happen, and we've seen a rip up to the upside. Bitcoin, has definitely rallied 2024 into 25, but we're seeing this sort of just get steeper and steeper, and this, the price action seems to be getting suppressed. So when Bitcoin runs, it's going to rip extremely high to the upside. And let's just transition this conversation right into the Bitcoin price chart. So right now, we're sitting at 104.7. And what do we see in these charts? This looks like quite a few different patterns that you can probably find here. Right now it's consolidating near all-time high. So charts definitely looking bullish. But if you see this downwards resistance, what we've seen here, right here back in December of 24, we hit that resistance again in January of this year. And then we got up above it and retested it and came back and had this back test here. And if you look and see what looks like is being formed here, this looks like it could be some type of funky double bottom pattern, potential head and shoulder you might be able to make out there. But you see that we came down, came up, blasted through, and this was just a back test. And this back test just happened around June 6th or 7th, so a few weeks ago. So this is just a temperature check for the market. People are running for the hills, and we're going to see that rip up to the upside. And we've showed this, to ad nauseum on our videos, but basically this takes us up to about 140,000. Could it, overextend that, and could we see 150? The bigger question and what's going to be interesting to see is when we get up to these new levels, what's going to happen? Are we going to see some type of price? Let me clear this chart up a little bit as far as the lines go. Are we going to see some type of price action that just goes up and has a blow off top, and then we have a big consolidation? Will this consolidation be a V-shaped recovery because will the ETFs and all the Bitcoin treasuries keep buying the dip? Will the dips be more shallow? There's a lot of questions that are going to be answered in the short to midterm when we do get this euphoria. But our belief definitely is like these dips will be shallow. If you look back, this is the 2021. No, let me look on the weekly chart. Sorry, I got to zoom out a little bit. So if we look on the weekly chart, we can see When we had that peak November of 2021, this pullback, we seen a 70%, 77% pullback roughly. Now, could we see another 77% pullback? That's potential, but it could be, extremely high, 400,000. If we get a pullback 77% there, that takes us back down to, roughly 100K. And that was just an arbitrary number on the, in the bullish case. But typically the pullbacks get more shallower too, cycle over cycle. So even if it doesn't go there and it goes to 63%, you see that, we could potentially be no longer see a 5-digit Bitcoin ever again, potentially. It all depends on what the buy pressure is. If you get a lot of sell off from the ETFs from some odd reason, you always got to play both sides of the coin. But right now we're seeing a lot of pent up buy pressure. There's a lot of FOMO, it seems, that's happening with these Bitcoin treasury companies. And I didn't know if you want, before we start talking about the treasury companies, if you wanted to chime in on the price action, Aaron.
I think if we go up, 300,000, 400,000, 500,000, I think that's when we would see a pullback of 70%. But if we just stair step our way up 20 to 30% a year, the cycles may have changed. The 4-year cycles may not look like what they've looked like in the past with all the demand and all the regulation changes that we're seeing. I mean, this time is literally different than 2017 and 2021. It's not the Wild Wild West anymore.
Yeah, regulations in place. ETFs are greenlit, and we've showed you those since, I believe, early 2024. ETFs, private public companies, pension funds, nation states like El Salvador. I believe it's between 3.2 and 3.4 million Bitcoin have been bought over the last 18 months, give or take. So that's within less than 2 years. 3.4 million off an asset that has a max cap of 21 million. And there's a few million that are lost forever. You got Satoshi's wallet. So you got, just looking at Strategy and BlackRock, they got about between 1.2 and 1.25 million coins themselves. So if you guys aren't seeing what's going on, the writing's on the wall that this buy pressure is not slowing down. So yeah, let's get to the next chart. So the one comparison we wanted to take a look at when it comes to the alt season is this chart here, because at some point in time, if you've been around for multi-cycles, eventually Ethereum was your baby. You might not like it so much anymore, but we are saying that the alt season is over with. And why am I showing you this chart? Because there's a lot of things that feel like 2016, 2017 in this current market. But the thing is, it's not in the traditional crypto space. It's in the TradFi space with these Bitcoin treasury companies. But the reason we're looking at the comparisons of Ethereum present day, you see it's around $300 billion market capitalization. And back in late 16, early 2017, before Bitcoin ran up to 20K, Ethereum was less than $10. And you see ETH have a parabolic rise up to a peak of about 1,300. That's including the wicks, but you're looking at a 22,000% return. Now, has there been returns in some altcoins? Yes. Has it been good returns? Yes, to some extent. If you're using Bitcoin as your denominator, at one point in 2023, Solana would have been a good arbitrage play for getting more Bitcoin value at the end of that trade. Solana, in my opinion, was artificially pumped because some big players got caught offsides when FTX and everything went down, and the market ultimately bottomed out there. But because of everything that happened with that, they had to get their liquidity back. And the big boys never lose. They just sort of, play the game how they want. And that's why you're seeing liquidity being pumped into Solana, because as the pumps were coming up, the big guys were pulling their money out. And I'm not sure what Sol's at right now, but I know it had some euphoria in 2023 and 2024. But you see this 22,000% return. And then from the bottom of the bear market in 2019 to the peak in 2024. So you went from a 22,000% return to another 5,800% return. That's a 58x for Ethereum from bottom to peak. Will this happen with some altcoins? Yes, but the biggest difference is that if you go to coinmarketcap.com, and let me just pull this up really quick, we can see that, let me share this quickly. You can see up in the top left corner, I'm not sure who pays attention to this, but there's 17.33 million cryptos. Back in 2016, this was not the number. The number was a lot less. So this is basically Bitcoin with over 17 million other altcoins. That's, if you're playing odds there, it's sort of like a casino. So you have a higher probable chance of just staying with what's been working and what the powers that be have said the winner is since really 2014. Bitcoin's been labeled a commodity per the United States government. But there was still opportunity back then to be able to go ahead and play the alt market because it wasn't as saturated. Now the saturation is definitely here. In 2020, 2021, you've seen the meme mania, and then there was 1,000 meme coins that popped up overnight, it seemed, with Dogecoin sort of, leading the pack there. Pepe popped off. People made some good money on that, but it was sort of like, which one's going to pop off? But you get what I'm saying. 17 million wasn't around. I believe this number is under 10K, when we first seen it. And there's some screenshots somewhere on the internet that you guys can find. But this is saturation in the alt market. And that's why, we're not seeing alt season like we've traditionally known it with the crypto space. Instead, we are seeing alt season in the TradFi space. So let's share this chart. We'll show this chart first because it had some news today, and Aaron lets you speak to that. But Saylor Scientific isn't one of the newer companies that's popped up as of late. They've been around for, I think, almost going on a year and a half with their Bitcoin treasury strategy, but they had some massive news today. I don't know if you wanted to speak about that, Aaron.
Yeah, similar. They announced their goal to hit around 105 Bitcoin by the 105,000 Bitcoin by the end of 2027. So, they finally got a plan. And I think what happened with Saylor Scientific is they're not seeing the gains right now of like what Metaplanet and some of these other Bitcoin treasury companies. Basically, my personal opinion is why they're trading below the amount of Bitcoin that they have on their balance sheet. So like they have like 600 million and their market cap is lower than that. It's somewhere like that. I don't know the exact number, but the reason why is what they went through a lawsuit and it kind of slowed them down from being able to buy Bitcoin. And people were kind of like, hey, why aren't you guys buying Bitcoin? We've invested. We thought you guys were going to continuously buy Bitcoin like what Strategy was doing. So I think people lost confidence in their plan. But I think with the announcement of the 105,000 Bitcoin by the end of 2027, we'll start to see Saylor, in my opinion, get a little bit of an MNAV, and they'll maybe be able to tap an ATM or, be able to do some other type of convertible notes to raise more money to buy Bitcoin. So yeah, I think Saylor, it may be a bottoming for Saylor here, that they're finally, their stock, after they announced this, their stock immediately pumped because people are wondering like, what are you guys doing? Are you going to buy more Bitcoin or are you not? So I think the market was just a little confused about that. But I think the announcement to obtain 105,000 by the end of 2027, I think it's good for them. And also all these Bitcoin treasury companies, they have these like lofty goals to get all this Bitcoin. And it's going to be interesting to see if they'll be able to get this Bitcoin before Bitcoin's price just absolutely goes parabolic. But I guess that's yet to be seen.
Yeah, that it's going to be interesting over the next few years to see, who can achieve these goals and who can't. I would say, obviously, the gorilla in the room is MicroStrategy or Strategy. They have about almost 600,000 Bitcoin. Saylor has set the standard for all these companies, so you can't, look past the elephant in the room. Now, there's a lot of people that are being a little bit harsh on the price action as of late, because we've seen a lot of these treasury companies pop up and hit a 10, 20x very quickly. Strategy has been sort of trading sideways. And there's a lot of reason for that. And will strategy continue to move? Yes. But the first thing that people need to understand is the law of numbers. It's very simple. It's a lot easier to go from 0 to 10 than what it is to go from 100,000 to a million, or 100 billion to a trillion as far as market capitalization goes. So it's a lot easier to double when you're not as big, you're more limber. And the analogy I like to use is if you think of like a boating dock, or a big body of water, and you have people jet skiing, and you have the big oil tankers, and you have, personal size, 10, 15 feet boats, and then 50-foot boats, and then you got your 100-foot yachts and such. But the way I'm sort of making the comparison is some of these newer companies that don't have any Bitcoin, consider them the jet ski. They're more nimble. They can get through the water a lot faster. They can turn a lot faster because it doesn't take as much energy to get them going. Now, when you scale up and you go from the jet ski to that 100-foot yacht, and that might be a company like, Metaplanet, or, CEP or 21, when they haven't made the official announcement yet, but when they have their 40,000 Bitcoin, that could be, it's just a heavier vessel. So it takes a little bit more energy to get it going. And the same thing with the big oil tanker. The oil tanker, is going to be the slowest of all. But, when that thing starts to go and starts to roll, then, it's going to move, and there's going to be people paying attention to it. So that's the one thing that you need to understand, that strategy is that oil tanker amongst all these other boats. And it's the only, think of this, it's the only company that basically has, private company that has as much Bitcoin as they have outside of BlackRock. And BlackRock is using it as an ETF wrapper. So there's a little bit different nuances there when it comes to price action and optionality of what they have, what BlackRock can do. So people being harsh on the price action, I would say don't be harsh, just be patient. Eventually they'll get that S&P inclusion. There'll be front running to that market with the S&P. And, so I think there's going to be some exciting times coming from MicroStrategy. But once again, it's a lot more difficult. Give me 1 second.
Yeah, just to follow up on that, though, the difference between strategy and then the rest of these companies that are popping up. Strategy, once the Bitcoin price goes up, if Bitcoin goes from 100,000 to 200,000, strategy has already won. Like, they have 700,000, 600,000 Bitcoin, whatever the number is currently. Once that happens, and the number of the Bitcoin price just goes up, that's going to be a massive gain for them. Some of these companies that only have 100, 200, 300, 400, 500 Bitcoin, if Bitcoin price doubles, they're not really getting a massive gain on that. And one thing to think about is strategy is going to benefit by the Bitcoin price going up. I think the other companies benefit by the Bitcoin price trading sideways or going down, because it allows them to get more BTC before the price eventually explodes. And one last thing I'm going to mention here is there are some people in the strategy space, the MicroStrategy space, that talk about these treasury companies like they're a bad thing. You shouldn't invest in them. Strategy's already won. Well, that's not the case. A lot of these companies are just popping up. there's going to be more risk. You don't know if they're going to sell the Bitcoin. You don't really know if they're going to dilute the shares and sell the shares and make the share price go down. You don't know what the team is going to do. But if they execute and they buy Bitcoin and they do what Saylor did, these companies are going to do well because they're buying the hardest asset in the world. So if you can get on one of these treasury companies, if you can get into one of them before it becomes, 1,000, 10,000, 20,000 Bitcoin owned company, you could probably get some really good gains because you know where Bitcoin's going and these companies are popping up left and right. You just got to be careful because you don't know how they're going to execute. But if they do execute, I mean, they're buying Bitcoin. And if you believe in Bitcoin, then you should be fine. So,
yeah, speaking on execution, the one that has, shown that they have the ability to execute at a high level is basically Metaplanet. Metaplanet has shocked a lot of people over the past year, but they're doing things right. They're doing things in a creative manner. Their Bitcoin price per share, they're trying to focus on that, increasing their Bitcoin price per share while not diluting shareholders. They came out and they've been very transparent. So you just got to see, like Saylor set the benchmark, and now these other companies are doing, I guess you could call it the Saylor strategy, but they're doing it with their own flavor. And you've seen there was a pretty ingenious move. They ended up getting Dylan LeClaire on board to be the director of their Bitcoin treasury strategy. Dylan, for all those that are on the channel that know, he's been in the crypto space for as long as I can recall and remember. A pretty young analyst, but he's definitely on top of his game. So pairing him with Simon, it seems to be like a match made in heaven. But they've been doing this for over a year now, and I think Dylan gets a lot of the credit because it seemed like when he got brought on board, the price then went up, and he definitely did add value to the team. But I think that gave the overall company more notoriety in the Bitcoiner space, bringing him on board. So that was definitely a good move from Simon and his executive staff. But you have to see, like, okay, they copied Saylor's strategy, but they did it with their own flavor. They were very, cognizant of the ATM, and Saylor at one point didn't matter if the price was going up, price was going down. He was hitting the ATM if he wanted to. They've been trying to be a little bit more strategic to where it doesn't, make the share price fall as fast when the price is actually going up. So there's just different nuances that some of these companies are doing. And what Aaron was alluding to when he mentioned you don't know, like, some of these companies' long-term game plans. Now, strategies did this for 4 to 5 years now, as far as this Bitcoin treasury strategy goes, and Metaplanet is going on, I think, a little over a year now, maybe 15 months. But that's longevity compared to some of these other companies that are just popping up and just getting started. Not saying anything against those companies because there's opportunity there, but that you got to have that long-term conviction. I think Simon and team have been pretty consistent with their buys and pretty consistent and transparent throughout the whole, since they've made their first purchase. So it's something to definitely note there, when you're looking at all these different treasury companies, which one should I buy? This one has X amount of Bitcoin. Now, the ones that haven't been around as long, with more risk, there's higher return or higher reward. So you have to weigh out all those pros and cons. Do your due diligence on the team, the CEO, understand if they're really a Bitcoiner, or are they trying to fake it, because there's going to be some that and we're not going to call anybody out, but there's going to be some that are just trying to follow the hype, and they're seeing that, this is like sort of the ICO craze back in 2017. Like, as soon as a coin got listed on Binance, pop, it goes up left and right. And this is what you're starting to see now. You're seeing these companies start to come up left and right. And, the test of time will be when there's that drawdown, that pullback. Some companies will be over levering and not managing their risk appropriately. So it's just something to note. There's huge opportunity right now in that space. So if you're not looking at Bitcoin treasuries, this is not financial advice. If you're not looking at it, this is just something that we are, and we know a lot of other people are doing it. There's a lot of these companies that are acting like the altcoins and have already acted like the altcoins back in 2016, 2017's run up. You can even use like strategy as the benchmark, saying like the equivalent of Bitcoin, and then comparing it to like Ethereum or an XRP or a Litecoin back in 2017. All those companies are going to X more than Bitcoin, but some will be around long term, and these are mostly publicly traded companies, so they have regulation to abide to. So there's not going to be any shady business. But you can get knocked out of a position when it comes to over levering. So it's not, zero risk. And then, some companies might rehypothecate things if they're not being transparent. So that comes to the transparency key. So that's sort of my take on it. But let's just look at a few of these. Firstly, everybody's favorite, Metaplanet. So you see here, back in April of this year, the price was back down to $1.63. And there's a lot of analysts, you got to shout out. If you do not follow Climb That Ladder, he puts out a lot of good content. Been following his X account for quite some years now, even back when he was, getting into the MSTR trade. But check out Climb the Ladder's account. He has a lot of good stuff with MTPLF, Metaplanet. But you see, this was April of this year, a 700% return from bottom to top. Now, is this going to stop here? Is the fun over with? We think it's just getting started. Like, we don't think that this is just going to come up to $13 USD and then it's a bear market. Now, is there risk in the market? Yes, there is. I think I seen somebody ask a question. What was it? The impact of Bitcoin from possible escalations of the war. Yeah, that's something that could escalate, and that could, turn into some type of event, a cascading event that, people can speculate and people can, have their opinions on what's going on. But basically, no one has a crystal ball, and you can say for a fact it's going to affect markets in this way. So, when you have fear, you should potentially be buying. There's a opportunity to buy. Looking at this chart here, back in April, this was around the tariff talks. So there was a lot of people saying, "Oh, Trump's going to sink markets," and where's our bull run at? And well, the bull run has started and has been here, but it's not how most in the crypto space have envisioned it, because the traditional alt market hasn't been performing as well. Bitcoin dominance has been continuously stair-stepping its way up. Dominance is up to 64%. Will that roll over? It's a different conversation, but right now, this is what we're seeing. These are acting like the altcoins of 2017. This fear here, the tariff talk, was a buying opportunity. So you got MTPLF being the US ticker, you got the DN3 being the German ticker, and you got the 3350 being the Japanese ticker. Another company, AltBG. AltBG, as you see, up and to the right, been blasting off. For some of these companies, we've had the opportunity to interview some of the CEOs and founders. This is one company, Alexandra. He's a good friend of the channel. Shout out to him and his team. we had the opportunity to speak with him. We spoke with him at Bitcoin Vegas, and got some more insight on what the team's doing. And they're doing things in a very strategic and different way by offering some of these convertibles with Bitcoin denomination. So if you've seen Adam Back had been an investor into this company from that lens. So like I said, go back to what I originally was talking about. Each one of these companies is doing the Bitcoin treasury strategy, but they have their own way to go about doing it in a creative fashion for shareholders. So AltBG is a French company, and if you haven't checked it out, we have the interview on our Twitter and both our X and also our YouTube. So make sure if you want to get more information about the company, understand how they're doing things, but they've risen drastically since the beginning of the year. This is the daily chart. Let's zoom out on the weekly, and this is just a parabolic to the top. Looks like some type of double bottom pattern, or it could be an Adam and Eve formation. But the trough was at 8 cents. Now this is in euros, so you got to do the conversion or whatever your denomination is. Most viewers are probably in the US, so you got to convert from euros to US dollars. But as you see, this has had a 6,000% return, so a 60x since the beginning of the year. That has outpaced a lot of things. So this is what we're saying, like this opportunity really is just ramping up. So once again, this is barring no crazy event. Bitcoin doesn't have any crazy pullback, because while this goes up, when Bitcoin's trading sideways, if Bitcoin has a massive pullback, these could melt as well. But if you look at the charts, look at the technicals, you see that this level here around €2.20, that is, acted as resistance right here. When it fell through it, tried to get back above, couldn't, fell down, came in, back tested this. Mind you, this happened over from 2015 to 2021. And then present year, blasted up through it. So if we do get a retracement, don't be surprised to see a 50 or 60% pullback. But does that mean the fun's over with? No, from a technical stance, this still looks good. You see, let's get rid of these Gaussian channels. You see the moving averages, they seem to be going up and to the right. 20s crossing over at the 50 and 200. And it is now trading above, let me see, that's about a decade of resistance from 2014 till present year, 11 years to be exact. So it's trading above that. So could we have a pullback? Yeah, it's a possibility. This could be a load up zone down here. Not financial advice. Could this just, have a slight pullback and a continuation? Yeah, that could happen too. But just know, if this does happen, don't think that it's over with. That would be considered fear in the market. So let's just see percent-wise what that would be if that played out in that capacity. It'd be about a 56% move. Now, if you got in down here and you've had a few X return, sometime the best strategy is having the dead man's portfolio and not trying to do these quick trades in and out to maximize gains, because that's sort of where you get burnt. And while you think it might do this, it could have a slight pullback and continuation. Now you're buying back in at €20. So before I continue, just if you had anything to shed on that, Aaron.
Just quickly about the war that somebody asked about. I think you shouldn't really base your investment decisions around a war, because there's really only 3 possibilities that could happen. And before I say this, obviously nobody wants war to happen, and hopefully the war going on in Israel and Iran, that ends sooner than later. But just hypothetically say the war breaks out, World War III happens, the world's coming to an end, you don't really care about your investments, bullets and guns are probably going to be what's worth value. And then, like, you can say World War III happens, or like World War III happens, and then it's just a war. There's no nuclear war. Like, what's going to happen is they're going to print more money to fund the war. And then Bitcoin is going to become a more sought out asset because you can move Bitcoin between borders without having, you can have the keys in your head. You don't need anything physical. It's not a physical asset. So it's going to be more sought out. And then, like, normally what happens with these war scares, the media talks about them for a week or 2 weeks. The markets sell off. It's really a buy the dip opportunity. Obviously, nobody's hoping for war, but you really should buy the dip when stuff sells off, when there's war calls. And then a month or two later, nobody's talking about war. Like Ukraine, war in Russia is still going on right now. A couple of years ago when that happened, the market sold off when it initially happened, but there's still people dying today in Ukraine and Russia. And it hasn't affected the market at all. And you can go back in history. Anytime we've ever had war, probably outside of World War II, it's, the market has always gone up. So you shouldn't really base your decisions on war. And I think it'd just be a short-term catalyst to buy the dip.
Yeah. Just to piggyback on that, to go all in on an investment, you got to have conviction. If you feel, a certain way about war and what's going on in your country, optionality is never a bad thing to have, but, it's a back pocket play. If different passports, different residencies, have an option, optionalities to go places, that's you can always make it make sense for you and your family. But yeah, that's basically the conversation there. We got over 400 people on this, so we appreciate your support. Smash the like button, share. But yeah, let's continue. So that was AltBG. Did you have anything to say about AltBG before we went to the next company?
AltBG, I'll just say quickly, I like what they're doing. They've been able to get a lot of Bitcoin in a short amount of time. Their team seems to be hyper-focused. Alexandre, any presentation he's had, he said, we're following playbooks or Saylor's playbook to a T. And yeah, we like the company, so we'll see what happens with them in the future, and we'll keep you guys up to date. But yeah, I like what they're doing, and they seem like a good play for the future if you believe in Bitcoin and Bitcoin treasury companies.
And here's Alexandre Lizette. You can check him out there. Give him a follow on X. Him and his team are doing some great things over there at AltBG. Shout out to them once again. So the next, what we're going to talk about is a newer up-and-coming Bitcoin treasury company. And look at this chart here. It's like, this is on the weekly, and you can't really see too much price action, so let me dumb it down to the daily. But H100, I'll let you kick off the talk about this, Aaron.
Cool. Yeah, H100, they are a Swedish company backed by Adam Back, and I believe they have around 160 some Bitcoin right now. And they've been raising them through convertible debt, and they go through these things called tranches. They've gone through the first 4 tranches very quickly. That got them to 162. I actually just saw an article. They just closed tranche 5, which is going to allow them to buy another around 10 million USD. And then they have 3 more tranches, which are going to give them around around $75 million USD to go buy Bitcoin. And they seem very promising. And they could be a great performer if they continue to execute and continue to obtain Bitcoin. But if you look at their market cap right now, I think it's somewhere around 150 to $250 million, unless that's a big range. I don't have the numbers in front of me right now. But if you look at their market cap, and then you look at the amount of Bitcoin they're about to buy or planning to buy, and how fast they've bought the Bitcoin in the past, they're gonna about 7x their Bitcoin probably in the next month. So it's like, what do you think that's going to do to the stock price? So H100 Group, we really like. One thing I would say about them, though, with H100 Group and with all these Bitcoin treasury companies, you have to be very careful. You don't know how the team is going to act. And just for one example, what we've seen with H100 Group, the CTO came out and he sold some of his shares. And people on Twitter were like yelling, like, why is this guy selling his shares? Like, this isn't part of the plan. So you don't know how these teams are going to act. And I'm not saying that H100 Group is a bad company because that happened. It's just all these companies are very new. There's a lot of risk. Comparing that to Strategy's been doing the same playbook for years, and you kind of already know what they're going to do. But these new companies, I mean, what's to say they just hype up their stock and then sell all the Bitcoin and run away with the money? I mean, I don't know if, and they're in different countries, so there's different legalities you got to look into and all that. So just a lot of risk to consider in your investments. But H100 Group, definitely like the company. We interviewed the CEO as well. Check that out on our Twitter page. Yes, that's what I gotta say about them.
Okay, yeah. So we had the H100 Group. Here's the CEO. Shout out to Sander. He came on the channel, I think it was last week or maybe a week and a half ago. Yeah, definitely they are the first of their company type in the Nordic region. They're from Sweden. There's a lot of upside here, a lot of potential upside. Once again, not financial advice, but this is sort of one of the companies where you got to do your due diligence and you got to look into, seeing what their game plan is. Right now, they did get some funding. They have about $70 million, I think, in tranche 4 or 5. They got some backing from Adam Back, which he's definitely a notable Bitcoiner. OG Bitcoiner, don't call it notable, OG. He's been around, since Bitcoin's been around. But they're getting funding from the right avenues, and they're being very vocal right now. I've seen that they were in Bitcoin Prague. We did not have the opportunity to go this time, maybe next year. But basically, shout out to Sander and team. They're making some major waves in the market. As you look at this chart again, it's going up and to the right. Now, look at the market capitalization. This is in SEK. That's the Swedish krona, I believe is how it's pronounced. Market cap 1.29 billion, but this is in their currency. So if you're in the US, you have to divide this by 10. So that'd be $129 million market capitalization. So still fairly small. They have 169 Bitcoin with some money on the sideline in tranche 5 and 6, I believe. They're getting ready to implement, and they could jump from 169 up to, I think, between 800 and 1,000 Bitcoin, depending on the Bitcoin price. So with that move, their MNAV, people are talking about MNAV, and in these, peaks of euphoria, and the euphoric moment really is just getting started. This is like inning 1 of the game. The peak euphoria, these MNAVs can expand to things we've never seen before, because we've never seen this before in markets. This is the first time, companies have bought an asset globally, and they've been racing to buy it, but also being supportive of one another, because it's like a whole community, a Bitcoin community. But, this is the first time in history that we've seen this. So just because this right now has an MNAV, people have been saying over 10, that doesn't mean it can't go to 20 or 30 or even higher with this euphoric moves in the market. Something we found out, that there was some pent up, buy demand from Canada for this particular asset, and it was because of the way Canada structures their securities and allows their citizens to buy certain things and not have access to other things. For instance, Metaplanet, I know that they did not have access to, not every Canadian had access in their traditional, in their retirement accounts. So they had to just buy Metaplanet with cash only. So, you got some people that's worked, 20 years and is in this space, and they can't buy an asset that just did a 6x over the past month and a half. So there's other Bitcoiners that are in certain places that, are watching and seeing, some of these companies make these moves. So, shout out to the H100 Group. You don't know, how big the demand's going to be. And another thing to think about too is when these OTC tickers get, let off in major markets.
Was that Canada, bro? Or you said Canada? For
Canada.
Was that SWC or H100?
In terms of being able to buy it?
Swedish company.
No, I know. I'm saying Canadians had a pent up, buy for this company because they couldn't get access to Metaplanet.
Oh, okay. Dang, I didn't know.
Yeah. No, it's a Swedish company, but what I'm saying is there's pent up demand in other parts of the world for these companies that are bi-coastal. And so they have an OTC ticker, the HOGPF. Has that been released just about a week ago, within the past week, recently?
I don't even know if it has volume. I'm not sure.
Yeah, the volume is a little, questionable on it. They may be trying to still get some kinks worked out. It is available, but if you're interested in getting this, if you can, do international brokerage. H100 has a lot of liquidity, and they are blowing up, as you can see. The chart's going up and to the right. So it trades on Schwab. Okay, cool. But yeah, so this is one company. Definitely check them out. They got some big things they're working on. Another one that we're going to look at and talk about has been melting faces as of late. SWC. Did you want to kick this off, Aaron?
SWC. I'll let you go ahead and talk about that one.
Okay, so SWC is the Smarter Web Company. And for those that haven't been paying attention, you can see what this chart did. And this chart has went from $3 down up to, as of late, $422 right now. But you see it's a 14,000% return. And basically, this is one of the first companies to start with the Bitcoin treasury in the UK. And they actually had an IPO that, went live in parallel with announcing this Bitcoin treasury strategy play. As far as their overall Bitcoin count, let me not misquote it. They have 347 Bitcoin at the current time, and Bitcoin value is around 36 million. And the overall company valuation, I'll have to do the conversion, but roughly, give or take, about $25 to $30 million, based on what I'm seeing here. So it is still a somewhat small company in hindsight when you're comparing it to a company like Metaplanet or Strategy. And once again, they have 346 Bitcoin. That's not anything to discount. They've bought very aggressively. As you see, their chart has been going up and to the right. So you have to just do your due diligence on every team. You have to ask yourself, are they going to have the same conviction that Simon has at Metaplanet or that Saylor has at Strategy? And are you confident in this company when having your own investment thesis? Because you might have X amount of dollars to invest in the market, and you like what Strategy has going on, you like what the blockchain group's doing, you like what Metaplanet's doing, and then you have X percent of your portfolio left over. So you want to just be strategic in your investment. And once again, look at the time frame. The time frame. This is since late April. You've seen a 15,000% return. Now, can this continue? Yes, but can it have a pullback? Yes, as well. Once again, everything's indicative of what Bitcoin does. So if you're in tune with what Bitcoin's doing, and if Bitcoin has more steam in the tank, then Bitcoin being the largest ship in the harbor, is going to pull the rest of the boats up with it. So that's just something to keep in mind. And then we will talk about the next company, and I think this might be the last one, unless I missed one.
So good. K33 you got
K33. Okay. We'll look at that next. Yeah, we just had them on the channel. So there's another company right here, Venadi Coffee. This is an interesting company. And if we pull up, before we get to the chart, if we pull this up, this is the Bitcoin treasuries.net. You see them here, number 85. I think they have 32 Bitcoin, not 30. So this hasn't been updated yet.
Yeah, there's one, two more.
Yeah, and they've been sort of dollar cost averaging into Bitcoin every single day. They've been buying 1 Bitcoin, 2 Bitcoin, 1 Bitcoin, 2 Bitcoin. This is an interesting company, very small company. And so do your due diligence. And all these companies we're talking about is not financial advice, just throwing that out there. These are just, interesting companies that we ran across. And, it's just, this one sort of has a unique story. It's a coffee company. And people are like, oh, well, the bull market's over with. A coffee company is buying Bitcoin treasuries and it's over with. Nah, I mean, you can't really look at it like that, because they had a product they were offering to the market. And I think they had 6 or 7 locations in Spain is where they're based out of. The CEO, he is a lifelong entrepreneur, been in a lot of different endeavors, some in the tech space. Maybe he might be a coffee connoisseur. Don't know him personally. Maybe we'll be able to get him on the channel one day for you guys. But the point is you see the technicals on this. Since this company went live in Spain's market, you can see that it just went down and to the right. So they could have had some type of reverse split, and people didn't like what was going on, and look, it tanked all the way from $35 down to here. But you see there was some resistance here around 80 cents. It sort of acted as support for some time, fell through, bump and run to the bottom and bottomed out. And now it looks like we do have some type of rounding bottom. Now, the interesting thing about this company is they have a meeting coming up with their board in about, I think, 10 days on the 29th. And basically, they're supposed to be getting 2 tranches of $50 million, $100 million total. So you do the math real quick. That's going to propel them from 30 Bitcoins up to close to 1,000 Bitcoin. Now, are these investors going to come through? The investors, they have been listed. I don't remember the names off the top of my head. But you see that this is a rounding bottom. This tends to show a flip in the market as far as potential upside momentum when you see these rounding bottoms. And if you look at the moving averages, you see the 20s crossing over both the 250, and it's sort of acting like support, and it came back up and kissed that 80-cent range. So this is a company to pay attention to and see what goes on. They have that meeting on the 29th once again to talk about those first 2 tranches of potentially $100 million that they're going to then put on the company's balance sheet and buy Bitcoin. But there's still a lot more to be discussed there regarding this company, because they don't have any dashboard, they're not showing any metrics, they're the proof of reserves. Once again, transparency is very important in this space. Not saying that they're doing anything malignant or they're not. Can you guys still hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. I just got a weird message on my computer. But not saying that they're doing anything malicious in the markets or they have ill intent, but as you know, just being a thorough investor, you want to just do your due diligence 100%. Someone said Pokemon card treasuries. Yeah, you know, speaking of that, of the alt market, I don't think we talked about this. Cardano, its founder, Charles Hoskinson, if you know who that is and what his history is, he was one of the original devs that helped build out the Ethereum blockchain. Him and Vitalik did not see eye to eye on everything, and they split. And he went and did his own thing at Cardano, while Vitalik and team stayed back and did Ethereum. As of, I think, about the past week, he came out and announced that he's selling some Cardano to put Bitcoin on their treasury. So you're seeing altcoins now. What was that?
Smart move.
Yeah, you're seeing altcoins.
You're gonna say Cardano.
Right, like that could be a good play. So you're seeing altcoins, put Bitcoin on their balance sheet. So could there be an alt season, for Cardano? And also the other one that we seen was Polkadot. They sold some dot off and they were buying Bitcoin. Now, are we telling you to go buy those altcoins? You got to do your own due diligence, do your own research. We're just relaying the news. We're two guys on the internet sharing our opinions. That's it. I didn't talk. Go ahead, bro.
Yeah, I just want to say, a lot of people I think are people are disappointed in all these treasury companies coming up and performing very well, and they are comparing to looking at what strategy is doing and seeing these companies and they're getting disappointed, and they're buying Bitcoin. I mean, they're doing something good for their shareholders, so they should be rewarded for that. So as long as they execute, if these companies execute exactly what Saylor did, I mean, they're going to be successful. I mean, so you shouldn't be discouraged because strategy has been like a stable coin, but strategy is going to win. All these companies, if you invest in any of these companies and they happen to just do the strategy, buy Bitcoin over a long period of time, I think they're all going to win right now, at least, because we're still early. This is very early. The companies that do this at 500K Bitcoin, a million Bitcoin, that'd be a different story. But I think we're still very early for these companies.
Yeah. To Guillermo's point, it's a strong stance to take and say you're going to 21x your Bitcoin stack over the next 2.5 years. But I mean, if you do the math, the numbers don't lie. They've been doubling their Bitcoin stack every 3 months, roughly, give or take, plus or minus X amount of days. And that's an actual statistic. So if you just do the math really quick, just for this year, there's about 6 months left. They double and double. That puts them, their target's 30K. So I don't think Dylan and Simon are going to put out targets that aren't achievable. And I'm basing this more on Dylan because I followed Dylan for quite some time, probably well over 6 years, give or take. But the point is I don't think they're going to. They've gave out benchmarks and they've overperformed those benchmarks. So don't be surprised if they overshoot 30,000 Bitcoin by the end of the year. If you just look at the doubling factor, that'll put them at around 40K. So don't be surprised.
I think what's going to happen is I think eventually the price of Bitcoin we're going to have a short squeeze. The price of Bitcoin goes up. And all these lofty aspirations that all these companies have, we're going to have 300, we're going to have 500. There's not that much Bitcoin to go around for everybody. So it's if Saylor has 1 million and Metaplanet has 200, and then these countries have however many, and it's just not going to be enough. And some of these Bitcoin treasury companies aren't going to get what they're saying they're going to get. I mean, Metaplanet might, AltBG might. We don't know, but we do know that strategy is the grill in the room. But strategy is also not going to 2x their holding. So for that coffee company we just looked at, they have a $2 million market cap. And if it is true, allegedly they said they have $100 million of euros of funding that's going to come in to buy Bitcoin. if they do that, their market cap's going to go from 2 million to whatever the MNAV, 100 million plus whatever MNAV. And obviously that's very risky, but if they do that, that's what's going to happen. So you're not going to get a 100x on strategy either. So it's like, you kind of got to weigh your risk reward ratio.
Yeah. Yeah, there might be some lunch money bets, or maybe no bets at all. But you got to think of it like this too. AltBG has been very aggressive in their buying. Metaplanet has been very aggressive in their buying, and they have sort of the track record to show that. So basically, when it comes to being able to 20x your stack, can strategy do that? No. There's not that much. There's literally not that much Bitcoin. That would be what, 12 million Bitcoin. There's not that much for them to buy. So when it comes to opportunity costs, you just got to sort of weigh your own personal investment thesis. And there's been a lot of people that's jumped from strategy and invested, went all in on Metaplanet, and that's been a good payout so far. But strategy will shock some people this year, and there will be a narrative around strategy. They're probably going to get S&P inclusion, and there will be some type of hype leading up to that. So if you pair that with Bitcoin going up, naturally the stock price is going to go up. And depending on, Saylor's been really strategic. Yeah, 100% strategy is a good bet. But Saylor's been strategic on, these new offerings he's had with Stripe, Strike, and Stride, and, using those ATMs to then buy more Bitcoin to then prop up the common A share for the MSTR share is a whole different, animal that he just started to really unleash. So what that's going to do for the price as those offerings scale, that's going to be it's going to be interesting to see. So there's a lot of chess moves that a lot of these, strategy being one, Metaplanet, AltBG, a couple of these other companies we discussed. Like, there's a lot of chess moves that's going on behind the scenes.
You think strategy gets to Nakamoto, 1 million Bitcoin?
I think so. Barring nothing crazy, no crazy event happening. But right now they're at 600. I think, I'm not going to put a time frame on it because it's, going to be a little bit more difficult even for them to get another 400,000 Bitcoin if Bitcoin shoots up to an astronomical value. But, Saylor might have some other plays in his back pocket. When that liquidity starts to come in, he might be able to go, pull 100 billion somewhere. I don't know, but I think they have a good opportunity to get a Nakamoto 1 million.
Yeah, I think they're gonna get there. I think the S&P is gonna help them get to that 1 million, and then that's game set match.
Yeah, they'll both do a 10x. But remember the analogy with the oil tanker, and then Metaplanet might be compared to a 50-foot, 50 to 70-foot small yacht right now. So they'll move faster than the oil tanker. They'll get that 10x probably faster. That's not financial advice. That's just just the law of numbers. But strategy will definitely get a 10x. It might just be a little bit a longer time frame. So whatever your time horizon is, time in the market always beats trying to time the market. So remember that.
Yep. And we have 583 people watching. So if you're on YouTube, subscribe. If you're on Twitter, follow us. Hit the like button. We really appreciate everybody tuning in. And just want to mention really quick, K33, make sure to check out them as well. They're a Swedish company, and we did an interview with their CEO on our Twitter page and YouTube. You can check that out. They have plans to get 1,000 Bitcoin. I believe right now they only have around 25. Could be, I think, somewhere around there. But we'll see how that progresses. Just wanted to mention K33 is another one you should have on your just watch list to see how they perform and how they accumulate Bitcoin. So another potential company. I mean, there's so many. It's hard to keep up with all of them, but this is another one, and we got to talk to their CEO. So just wanted to mention it there.
Yeah, you see their price action here. So this is another one. Just take a quick look at the bottom of the market back in April around the tariff talks. They were 2 cents, and then they've had a rally up to about 300%, return. So about a 4x within, a few months is definitely a good return in any market. But they have a higher market capitalization, so we'll see. I know that as Aaron mentioned, they have 1,000 Bitcoin goal for their first goal, and they might surprise many and get to there pretty quickly. If you want to check out more from them, you can check them out here at K33HQ. As Aaron had mentioned, we had the opportunity to basically interview their CEO, and he discussed what they have going on. He discussed, what their short-term goal is, and they're looking at 1,000 Bitcoin in the short term, and they could maybe shock some people in the short to mid-term, but that's once again not financial advice. They're doing some interesting things there. They are a bigger company. They got worth about 1.3 billion, I believe. So pay attention to what K33 has going on as this Bitcoin treasury space progresses 100%.
Yeah, I believe they're a crypto exchange as well, but yeah, make sure to check out that interview if you haven't.
Yeah.
Promising company.
Cool. What else?
We can talk about the Genius Act that just passed. That's the stablecoin legislation that's going to be pretty big for the crypto markets. That just passed, and that's basically just giving regulation to companies like Tether, Circle. Circle just went public, and their stock has gone crazy. And then I just watched an interview today, Anthony Papagiano's channel, talking about Tether. I think he interviewed the CEO of Tether, and he said if we went public and we had the same valuation metrics that Circle has right now, they would be a $2 trillion company. So that'd be like, Tether is one of the biggest companies in the world right now. Like $2 trillion, that puts them up there with Bitcoin's market cap. So the stablecoin space is going to absolutely explode. If you look at it right now, there's $255 billion in the stablecoin market. That's probably going to continue to go up. It's going to probably hit $1 trillion, 2, 3, 4. It's going to go up, and I think it's going to help the United States retain the global reserve currency with the United States dollar. And I think that's going to be good for the dollar. Obviously, we know they print unlimited dollars, so you don't want to invest in that. You want to invest in Bitcoin. But I think it's going to be good for the dollar worldwide, as it'll be the best fiat currency. But obviously, not a good investment. And then, like you're seeing now, J.P. Morgan Chase just came on. They said, "Hey, we're gonna launch a stablecoin." So we're going to see all these banks launch their stablecoins. It's going to be really interesting to see how they compete with Tether, when Tether has already taken over the stablecoin market. And now all that noise with the Tether FUD can go away now. Like with people saying Tether was going to blow up for years and years and years, they were saying Tether's going to blow up. They're going to have to sell off, and the whole crypto market's going to explode. But I think we can finally put that to bed. And this is just another win for the crypto space. It's good for Bitcoin. And Tether does put, I believe, 15% of their profits into Bitcoin. So they also are a Bitcoin treasury company. And I believe they hold over 100,000 BTC. I think they announced that at the Bitcoin conference. They hold over 100K Bitcoin. So this is good for Bitcoin. This is good for strategy. It's good for the entire crypto market. So I just wanted to...
Here's a little bit more insight from ChatGPT. If you don't use ChatGPT to get more clarity on things, definitely start. Saylor built out Stripe, Stride, and Stride, asking back and forth on deep think mode with ChatGPT, and then just gave the paperwork to his attorneys on staff and said, get it drafted up. This is what we want. This is how we want it. I've already, vetted out an artificial intelligent bot. So not word from the wise. But so the Genius Act is significant for Bitcoin and the broader crypto market because it aims to provide regulatory clarity, what a lot of people have been waiting for, the regulatory oversight. This is crucial for Bitcoin, which is generally viewed as a commodity. But as the altcoins, they're sort of in a gray area right now. Ethereum has gotten that head nod. It seemed to be listed as a commodity. I'm not sure if that was official, but they have Ethereum ETF. There was a lot of scrutiny back when Gary Gensler was in office, what Ethereum was. There's a lot of wordplay and semantics around that. So once this regulatory oversight gets put in play, it'll definitely help clear up some of those hurdles that the space has been seeing. It protects the innovation and startups. It reduces regulatory risk for early stage crypto developers. So you'll see the VC money start to pour into the space once this happens. And, for those that aren't aware of how that process works, once there's clarity, the big boys will then, fund more than what they've already been doing behind the scenes. But, some more of those early stage startups for, crypto developers. You've been seeing some, big companies, and when I say big companies, some of the altcoin companies potentially try to sponsor some of these, startup initiatives in, certain respects. So that's what's, happened since really 2017, and it's starting to grow. So now you can get the, the big guys to come in and help, push that pedal a little bit further. Boost institutional confidence. That's what I sort of just spoke to. And Aaron just mentioned U.S. leadership in crypto. That's been an initiative of the administration, and they've been very vocal in saying that. And there's been fears of falling behind UAE, Singapore, and Switzerland. If you haven't had the opportunity to visit any of those spots, they are definitely forward thinking. They are not third world. They are on top of what's going on in this space and heavily invested. It separates Bitcoin from riskier assets. So, the answer has already been made, if it's not already overly abundant, that Bitcoin is the clear winner in the overall space. It is the token. Now, does that mean there will be any other winners? No, there won't be a global. Bitcoin could potentially be the global currency of the world. Like, that's not going to be Ethereum. That's not going to be XRP. Could XRP get integrated in the banks and some payment rails? Potentially. That's still speculation until that happens. Brad Garlinghouse was saying some good things at the recent XRP conference in Las Vegas. I did check out a few clips from it. But overall, Bitcoin is that global measure where you're seeing nation states buying them, countries buying them, states buying them, individuals, family offices, institutions, all of the above buying and stacking Bitcoin. I don't believe you're going to see any type of euphoric matter of stacking when it comes to any other asset because of the scarcity of Bitcoin. Will Ethereum end up, eventually getting pivoted to with their ETF? Their ETF does have some small inflows, small in compared to Bitcoin. But yeah, that's a possibility in the future. But you sort of got to look at that more of like a, a security potentially. But yeah, so that's the reasons why the Genesis Act, just to sum it up for you really quick, is needed in the space. But that's what we have for you right now. I think that's it, right? Call it.
Yeah. I don't know anything else.
All right. I think we covered a lot, guys. Once again, we had to skip last week due to some, travel complications and things. But we do this every Thursday at 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. You guys like this content, make sure you go ahead and smash the like button, share this with any family or friends. We appreciate your support. You have any closing statements?
Nope.
Aaron?
Thank you guys for tuning in. Appreciate all you guys are watching.
Do your due diligence when investing in these markets. It is a lot going on. This feels like the ICO craze of 2016 and 17. There's a lot of opportunity. Just do your due diligence. And with that, we appreciate you guys.
See you guys. All right.